This is, what's the title of this panel? Star Stripes and
Superpowers.
Superpowers. And MD Boncher has, I kind of recruited you at the last minute to
Thrown to the wolves. Thank you, sir.
I think Morgan maybe was gonna do this panel, and so anyway, it's it's gonna be an adventure, like everything at BaseCon, but it should be fine. So
I'm disqualified.
yeah, you're good.
Well, as the gentleman said, I'm MD Boncher. I am a collector of comic books. I had been for a long time, back in the 80s and early 90s. Since then, the industry has evolved much since my heyday of collecting. But you're not here for me. You're here for the more erudite and experienced members of the panel. So I'm going to just pass it right on down and let them introduce yourself. And if you guys can give your initial thoughts basically on the topic of the Stars, Stripes, and superheroes and sort of the American roots and how it's evolving. So, Bill?
My name is Bill Willingham. I've written and drawn superheroes for publication for 40 plus years. The answer is, if I just give the answer, can we go?
That's up to them. We're their hostage for the hour.
The ways superheroes are done, where you have, like, Superman doesn't exist. I mean, we know he's fictional, he doesn't exist. But also the fictional character doesn't exist either. What we have is a large assortment of characters that have been called that, and changes depending on who's writing them. Dick Giordano, the president, they did a lot of titles of DC for so many years, once opined that superheroes don't make sense because there are a lot of right-wing characters written by left-wing individuals. And really, there were very few right-wing writers of superheroes during these last 30 plus years. So are they America's story in the sense that, well, you have 700 million people disagreeing on what America's story is, and just as many disagreeing on what a superhero is? Sure, it's America's story.
Matt?
I'm Matthew Bockholt. Is this on? It's not on. All right. Maybe now you can hear me? Okay. I'm going to hold it. I'm Matthew Bockholt. I get to play the normie on the panel, I think. I am not a big fan of, shouldn't say fan, I'm not a big consumer of comic books and superheroes, but I do enjoy them, and I think that they're a valuable part of American culture. I have seen the degradation of superheroes in modern times, and that's distressing to me. And in my own writing, I like the idea of superheroes, and sorry way to put this. I think that they're a moral good for society to have stories about heroes who are heroes not because of what they can do, but why they do it. I'll leave it there for now.
So I have to confess to probably being another normie on this panel, but my name is Wally Waltner. I am an author and storyteller. I have been a casual consumer of superhero media from my childhood in the 70s and 80s. So I think I would say, from my perspective, as someone who enjoys the anatomy of story and likes to figure out why stories work and why narratives are important to us at both an individual and societal level, the understanding of what a superhero is, I would agree with Matt in the sense that it's not about the powers necessarily, but about the motivations. And there's you think about the and you think about the stakes that the stories talk about and are told, they're either universal or they're hyper local. And I guess for me the formative one is I from not is like Batman the Animated Series, and for me that's high school and college era for me, so that resonates for me. I have an obligation both out of personal need but also out of a feel for the my home and my community to go and do something with the resources that I have. And when I can do that at scale for entertainment purposes, that enforces the narrative of what is the role of a hero in society, and what can we do to emulate that and then be inspired by those stories. So I'll hand it over to a not normie in terms of stuff, someone that I admire a lot. So.
All right, so is this on? Yep. So first off, I think if any of us are calling ourselves normie, we're in deep denial, man. I'm Alex Macris, a lifelong fan of comic books. Was fortunate enough to get to crowdfund my own comic book project called Ascendant, created a new comic book universe, role-playing game, and a couple of graphic novels from that. I definitely think that superheroes are central to the American mythos and vice versa. And the word I would use there is manifest destiny, which is how America historically viewed itself as a nation, and which is very much how most superheroes would view their receipt of their superpowers and how they approach using them.
That makes me have a question right back for you right away is, so the idea of manifest destiny, would you say also then the American ideal of kind of do it yourself? If something's wrong in the world, you want to, and you see there's a need to have it addressed, would you say that it plays into the superhero analogy there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think America sees itself historically as an exceptional nation. This goes all the way back to the city on the hill, the view of the founders of what they were creating, and our relationship with sort of legal institutions has always been loose. There's a sense if America does it, it's the right thing. Even if other nations do it, it's not necessarily the right thing. We feel good about ourselves using force when we look down upon it in others. We've been a fairly militaristic country in how we took control of the continent. And I don't say this is a bad thing. I love America. I think we're awesome. But it is what it is. And if you view us from the point of view of another country, if you talk to foreigners about how they think of us, you definitely get the sense they talk of us as, oh, America thinks it's the Superman, America thinks it's the cowboy, et cetera. And I think that's reflected in what you see in how comic book heroes behave. So absolutely. I have these exceptional powers, so therefore I will use them to do exceptional things, and if that means I have to break the law to do it, that's okay because I'm exceptional.
And what's interesting is that you end up with narrative memes and metas for that. With great power comes great responsibility. Is embedded in certainly the Spider-Man mythos, but it is reflective of America's self-perception, I think.
Anything else to add, gentlemen?
I just want to comment on if I see something needs to be done, I'll do it, even if it kind of breaks the law kind of thing. But I think it's because the superheroes in our mythos are rising to a higher law, like a moral law, rather than just the man's law. And even within that paradigm, they're still trying to follow the law as much as they can. They're oftentimes seen as, like Batman or Superman, as people who help the law rather than go against it to try and accomplish some other objective, right? And so they're working within the law to the extent that they can, but while also trying to cover their own identity. And so they are by nature also vigilante in many nature in their style of work, right?
Completely agree, but I would say that's how America views international law as well.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
We will absolutely work with international law, but then there's a higher law.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm stumbling a bit over your statement, if America does it, it's the right thing. as it's a little cart before the horse kind of thing. The implication being that because it's America doing it, it is therefore right. And I don't think that stands up to what the ideal of the superhero is, which is there's a struggle. I think America struggles to find out what the right thing to do is, and then perhaps when that's settled or perceived to the extent we are a nation capable of perceiving that, then we'll do it regardless of the consequences in the wider world. I mean, that does seem to be the essence of the superhero, which is I'm going to take what I've got and do what I can with it, regardless of the institutions that might get a little stepped on because of that. The phrase "with great power comes great responsibility," which has been turned into this kind of glib. I'm looking for the term an almost ecumenical. This is what we say, and because I have it so well said, I don't ever have to examine it. The thing I hate about Spider-Man and that particular phrase is it is repeated endlessly and almost never examined. The early Spider-Man story was, I think, a wonderful story of, I get these powers, I have no responsibility to anyone, it's a gift and I'm going to exploit it. But then because of the tragedy of his uncle dying, he learns that, no, I need to do something about this, and I could have stopped this whole chain of events. There's not a lot of superhero stories that go back to those absolute roots of what is my responsibility here. As a matter of fact, because so many of the characters have been with us for so long, there's very few stories of heroes coming to the realization of why they're needed. It's sort of, well, this is what I do. To a certain extent, you have to have. In one of the few times I got to write Superman, one of the conclusions I came to about him is that he's been doing this for a long time. He's calm. He doesn't get excited by much, and he kind of knows in the face of any crisis what should be attempted to in what order. And to a certain extent, all the characters are like that because we've had them for so long. I think I would love to see superhero stories that examine the base motivate the responsibility. Why does responsibility come with power? I mean, does anyone say no? That's not true, because look at all the people that get powers and they go do evil, and in Batman's world, for example, they get away with it forever. Anyway, I don't know if I've addressed the thing, but that's one of the things that.
This is quite interesting. So you have something else to say?
The thing that I was going to, go ahead, Matt. You were good.
No, go for it.
So I think the other thing that comes into this is we're looking at, in some ways we're looking at that at a personal level, but we're also looking at it at the societal level. One of the things that's uniquely special about America is its sense of individualism and its inherent distrust, at least ideally, of authority. So when we say, it's interesting, going back to examine the statement, if America does it, it's right, and may not be otherwise, and I understanding the tension between that, to me, I think it's because there's at least a societal view from an American standpoint that just because the authority says this is right doesn't mean that it is, and there needs to be a force to keep authority honest. And I think that's the root of okay, if America is doing it, it's because it is ideally, in response to that higher responsibility that goes beyond legalism and goes beyond authority wielding. So,
I'm gonna end cap this part here by it sounds like, in a lot of ways, the way comic books and sort of American culture, comic books have almost created a pantheon and mythology from American ideals. I like the use of the word sort of as an expression of American exceptionalism, as well as sort of the struggle between a Republican idea. We live in a republic, so you have protections for the minority, but at the same time, the individual needs to go it alone to express what is morally right by the context of American culture. But now this then begs the next part of the question is, with the evolution of comics over the last 30 years or so, we've seen a slide more towards international takes on comics between le bande dessinée in France and, of course, the big dog in the room, or more the tiger in the room, is the Japanese manga that is right now just an absolute monster force. And you have the rise also of independent comics, which are coming at the whole question at slightly oblique angles and generating new questions. But what that makes me wonder is, why is it that we're seeing this nadir of the classic American superhero start to fade? Is it because that the creators have abandoned the ideas that founded a lot of these original myths, demigods, whatever we want to refer to them as, the pantheon of American pop culture? Or is there something else that's sort of driving this overseas for a new take? So, Bill?
The answer is no. We haven't abandoned superheroes and the superhero ideal, but in the big two or the big three or whatever, the superhero ideal has long been abandoned. Through much of my career and most of why I was out of the door with Marvel and DC for so long, was that they had no philosophy of what this should be. They had a philosophy of, this is what works, and we need money, and these are the kind of stories that make money. The entire grim and gritty era, of which I am partially guilty in perpetuating, but is a result of just a cynical, what is selling better? I realize the battle for the soul of the superhero in the big companies was lost the day the Dark Knight movie came out, which was a big hit, and it was a good movie in the sense of wonderfully made and had a lot of interesting stuff. But the powers that be at DC Comics came out in public and said, well, now we understand what to do here, because The Dark Knight is so good and such a great movie. We're going to make Superman dark now, too. Which showed me that they had no understanding of who their characters were.
You can't make Hades Zeus.
I spent some time, and I don't know if it will ever get out there. I haven't released it. I spent some time just kind of an angry lecture to DC and Time Warner, character by character by character. This is what this character means. This is what this character means, and whatever. Clearly, you don't understand your own characters because you're generations removed from the people who made them. Martin Nodell, when he created the first Green Lantern, perhaps the most wonderful inspiration story ever. He was up at the DC offices at the time. Now published it, and he went and met with them, and they said, "Hey, if you can come up with a character, we'll publish it." Riding home from this meeting, he was on the subway out of New York. They were caught in the tunnel under the river, and there was a lot of work being done outside the train car, so that you could just see the stuff, and you could see things like the seepage from the being underwater and all this kind of stuff, and all the stuff they don't let you see usually. And he's looking out there, and there's a big red light that says they can't proceed, and he's wondering, like, is all that water going to crash on us and stuff like that. And eventually that red light turned green and they got to proceed, and that was his flash of inspiration. When you see the green light, you know you're safe. Everything's going to be okay. What a wonderful idea for a superhero character, that when the green light is showing, you're okay. And I know you were in some tough business right now, but now I'm here, green light showing, you're going to be okay. DC's forgotten that. I tried to have conversations with the people, Jeff Johns and others writing, and they didn't quite understand. Well, that's puerile and silly. I mean, come on, we fight monsters. What I'm saying is they lost track of it. The independents, of which there are many, the ones that want to do superheroes are, and they're remembering what superheroes were for, in the sense of, I have this ability to act. Do I have a responsibility to act? Or even if I have no responsibility to act, is it still the right thing to do? I think that is always going to be alive and well, and I think it is always going to be sort of the small, young up-and-comers that created the entire superhero industry before, that is going to be keeping that part alive. Its relation to manga, I confess, I don't care. Manga, as far as I can understand, is great action-adventure type stuff, and they do superpowers, but I don't think they do superheroes specifically. I'm sure I'm wrong, because there's so much of it, and I'm not going to read it, because it's just, it's not my cup of tea. But superheroes will always be around. They'll always, you're not going to find them in the bigger institutions anymore.
Matthew?
So I'm actually gonna go back to what you were talking about with responsibility, because I think that relates to this entire conversation, especially with the international angle. And because I think you're right, it's analyzing that with great power comes great responsibility. Like, what does that actually mean, and what does that mean on an individual level, and how you're actually using your powers and why you're using them? This is actually one of the reasons why I'm writing my current series. One of the main characters does basically over time become very, very superpowered, and he's analyzing all the responsibility that puts on him and why he does the things he does, and what he owes to friends and family and society in general with the abilities that he has. And so it's a very deep psychological analyzing of that phrase as part of the story. But I think you're right in that mainstream comics in America has kind of lost that plot. We see a lot of the very modern versions of superheroes are a lot darker or a lot more selfish and just kind of
Yes.
they're not really they may be super, but they're not heroes, right? They have superpowers, but they're not using them for super reasons, right? And that is where I think a lot of Japanese manga has kind of latched onto that original idea. I think of like My Hero Academia, where, you know, and this is where the normie part of me comes in. I haven't watched a lot of that. I think I've watched like the first 2 or 3 episodes, but even that much was enough for me to go like, wow, these guys actually get it. They understand what makes a hero, and that's kind of the story behind Deku, right? The main character is to get this power, he has to prove that he's actually, you know, going to use it for good. And I also see that kind of in a very different way in One Punch Man. You know, here you have this epic hero, but it's almost more of like he just wants to be left alone, right? He's just like, just let me live my life, and if you get in my way, then I'm gonna, you know, punch you, which no one ever survives. That's why it's called One Punch Man, right? So, spoilers if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's hilarious. It's a lot of fun.
It's in the title. They can.
Yeah, it's not a secret. But I find that it's obviously meant to be silly, but I find it an interesting examination of the idea of superheroes, because it's not just One Punch Man, right? You have all these organizations of the superheroes, and most of them are doing what they do for money or pride or you know, sponsorship and all this stuff. And here the best superhero in the world is just like, I just want to live a normal life. Like, I just want to be left alone.
I find it interesting that you can, and I don't think this is something that's a revelation. I think we all kind of observe this as the narrative of America has been meddled with in media across the spectrum. It is natural for that to end up in the large institutions of, you know, of this particular media. And I also think there's a parallel with the you know, become more prevalent, that counter, you know, voice is, you know, kind of rising up. And it's weird, you know, the tables have turned, and now what was considered traditional culture is now the counterculture. And there, you know, I think there's opportunity in re-examining, you know, these, you know, those principles in order to help drive a conversation about what can and should, you know, America as a culture be, and why have we ceded, you know, that narrative to other places, you know, and where can we find inspiration in those places to be able to reclaim that mantle?
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. I think superheroes have been a casualty of the culture war more than anything else. If you are a white man who defends Gotham, you're a white savior. If you're, you know, heroically defend the damsel in distress, it's misogyny. All of these labels that have been blasted across the culture war battlefields have hit superheroes extremely hard because they are the closest we have to the archetypical myths of heroism that trace all the way back to you know, the groundings of Western civilization. And when your you know, elite institutions have turned their back on those foundations, when your entire mainstream media has turned its back on them, then of course this sort of silly, you know, spandex-clad genre, which is the output of them, will also be poisoned by them. I found when I tried to create a character like Superman, the only way to do it was to actually make the person who became the Superman XP in my setting. I mean, what I ended up settling on was that he was a Gulf War veteran, father of 2 Christian, who is a volunteer firefighter, little league coach, and lives in Freedom, Nebraska, because fuck you, that's why, right? Like, and so everyone reading it, the critics were like, oh, so the plot twist is he turns evil. No, the plot twist is there's no plot twist, because fuck you, that's why. There's no plot twist. He is just a good dude. And so, obviously that helped my reputation among the left a lot. But I don't see that there's any way to take superheroes back without sort of drawing a strong line on what we believe in and why superheroes were good in the first place. And Japan, at least to its credit, doesn't hate its own culture anymore. Like, Japanese people actually think Japan's pretty awesome, and they love Japan. And so they can actually make heroes that are still heroic.
I'm not sure I agree with that last statement, but that's probably a discussion for another time.
Sure.
I just wanted to bring up a couple things that I've seen that kind of bother me in how modern superheroes are going, and one of them was at the end of Endgame, when Captain America decides to stay in the past and hang up his shield, I guess, and that to me kind of broke my heart in a way. Not that, in a way you're like, yeah, he deserves it. He's done all this work. Good for him for finding a happy life in the end. But at the same time, you're like, okay, but now are you abandoning, like, look at all you've done with your powers that have saved humanity. You've given up any chance of being that hero again for what are hard to not call selfish reasons, right? I'm sorry that, your dream girl, died before you woke up, or got too old for you anyway, at least, right? Like, it's just this weird. It's especially weird to me because in the same story you have Tony Stark, who takes like the opposite path, right? He's found the peaceful, happy life, and he leaves it to come back and save the world one last time, at the sacrifice of his own life. And so you have like these two different ideas of what the superhero should do ultimately. And the other one that struck me recently was watching Invincible. Has anyone seen Invincible? A few people. Just to give you an idea who haven't seen it, the premise is basically a Superman who's not Superman, right? He's Superman, and he acts like Superman, but really he's evil and has his own intentions in mind. And when that comes out, it's like you said, like, ooh, the plot twist is that he's evil. I'm like, yeah, but that's not particularly interesting. What makes Superman interesting is that he's not evil. Because who among us, if we could do absolutely anything we wanted and no one could possibly stop us, who among us would actually be Superman? Like, that's why he's amazing. That's why he's Superman. That's why we look up to him, is not because he can fly or shoot lasers from his eyes or whatever else he can do, invented this week. Why we look up to him is because no matter what he can do, he will always do it for the right reasons.
I was charmed by the scene in Endgame where Captain America retires. I think one of the ideas that is not often discussed in superheroes is when it's time to quit. In military culture and in the fiction around it, one of the recurring themes is that when your tour is up, when you've done your part, go home. Those that will not go home when their tour is over, knowing that others are going to step in and take their turn, those end up being problematic. The General Ishimo that will not retire because he wants. I like the fact that it was a quiet decision that, like, I've done my part, I've served my country. Now I'm going to go home, and others are going to step up and serve their country. Now it's colored by the fact that the pretenders to Captain America after him have been less than lovely. But I thought it was a terrific moment that kind of plays off I think it was Nietzsche. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea that if you battle with monsters often enough, you become one. Leave when it's time to, and I thought they handled that pretty well.
Yeah, just real quick, I just want to clarify that. I wasn't necessarily saying that was a bad thing. I just thought it was interesting that they had both extremes like in the same movie, and the way they treated them differently. Anyway,
Had some good ideas.
Wally, why don't I let you, or did you
No,
have
go
a
ahead.
point that specifically for it? Because I was gonna say.
I just want to talk about the Captain America.
Oh, sure, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so, if you had written it, I think I would give that scene the benefit of the doubt and say that this is a scene about a military hero who's done his part and is retiring to go live the good life, and it's being handed on. But given what we know about the authors of these movies and Hollywood's attitude, it's really hard to escape that the message is actually the message that we get every day on social media, that you hear coming out of corporations like, white man, step aside, America, stand down, it's time for you, your day is over. And I
Yeah,
think
they're
that's,
terrible.
that's the message that they were actually sending, which is why I hated that scene. But I think
I-
it's coming
I
from
took
someone
what-
like you.
Yeah, I took what I wanted from.
right.
Well, and that kind of, what is our responsibility as consumers of media? Because ultimately, the artist is never in control of how the art is perceived. You may say, this is what I meant, and this is, but if someone takes another interpretation from it, and that brings them comfort and entertains them, okay, and you pay me, okay. But at the same time, and from a cultural standpoint, I can take that scene, remove its context, and say this is a rallying cry for making sure the next true hero can step in so that Captain America doesn't have to stand an eternal vigil.
So on that note, I would like to, since I see
One thing
some
real quick.
alert eyes out there that might have some questions, I'd like to turn it over there. Yes.
I just want. Keep that in mind as a writer.
All right, there we go. I just wanted to ask a question if you've opened the questions up.
Yeah, well, everybody deserves to. toss
You
in
have
if
the
they want
loudest
to at this
mic.
point. We
I
got
do.
enough time for some-
Well,
one
I
can
have a
stop you.
DJ voice. It's been trained for 30 years to project. I probably don't even need the microphone, to be honest with you. But I wanted to give a specific example of some of the stuff that you were talking about and get your thoughts on it. I really enjoyed the movie Hancock because I thought it was an interesting take. Somebody said, like, the superhero can do whatever he wants, but he chooses to do good. Well, in the beginning, Hancock does whatever he wants. He throws a whale naked into the sea. He impales a giant SUV on top of a building and does a whole bunch of stuff that's really, really stupid because he feels like it. He gets drunk, does all this stuff. And then over the course of the film, he becomes heroic and he remembers what he's supposed to do. And he goes from being vaguely an asshole to being kind of a Superman analog. And I wanted to get your take on that, and if you thought that was a good trope or maybe not.
I did like it. I really enjoyed Hancock, and I know a lot of people didn't, but I did, for the reasons you mentioned.
I'm a sucker for redemption stories, and that's essentially what it is, dressed up real nice. But if the hero starts off as kind of a dick and learns to be otherwise, by golly, I'm all for it.
I mean, it's called the hero's journey for a reason. There has to be we want to see a transformation. It doesn't necessarily have to be the full spectrum from evil to good, but there has to be, a threshold crossed and a lesson learned and character development. We can't, because at the end of the day, we care about the character.
I would like to mention that's another story. If you haven't seen Hancock, this is going to be a spoiler. Go watch it anyway. It's great. That's another story that also deals with the theme of sacrifice. Sacrificing what you want for a greater good for the other people, because it's not only Hancock that's a superhero. There's another superhero in the movie and it turns out they're in love. But if they actually are together, then they lose their superpowers. And so it becomes also not not only a redemption story, but a sacrifice story. Like they have to sacrifice what they want most in order to be able to be a good, in order to be superheroes.
You want to top that up, Bill, or shall we?
And just real quick, again, that's not to say that they made the right choice. I don't think there's a right or wrong choice there, but it is a choice that they have to make, and they have to make for a reason.
That's where the movie lost me, because we can't be together or our powers will go away. Why? Who set up that situation? I mean, with great power comes great responsibility. Who gave you the power? Who hands you the responsibility? Is a question that needs to be dealt with.
Okay.
That's all I
question.
gotta say.
We'll go with the gentleman closest here and then get to who we can.
I might be aging myself a little, but I remember when DC gave Superman the apartment that looked like it was on maybe the worst side of town. He started to deal with his neighbors and their domestic violence situation. He goes next door to stop it, and he has to control himself because you can see he wants to beat the guy. He's bloody and leave him laying there. And then a couple of months later, all of a sudden they shifted gears and that whole storyline, like, it's gone. Was that the start of them trying to make the character more appealing to certain audiences, or that was a one-shot take to try different things?
DC's always trying to make its characters more appealing to audiences because they haven't a clue of what their characters are, what their characters want, any of that. They're constantly resetting it. To a certain extent, Marvel, but absolutely in DC, their corporate culture is we will take forever to make a decision, and once we finally make a decision, we panic. Because now we're locked into a decision. So much of the editorial staff is the avoidance of decisions. Not to succeed, but their motivation is don't be the one that screws up. That permeates the comics, and you're constantly seeing these resetting. And that's why they're at the mercy of every idiot that comes along taking his turn to write the character and completely resets it. That was let's make him a street-level superhero. Superman should never be a street-level superhero. Didn't he go on a wandering of, I'm going to walk America and find the true America? Lots and lots and lots of idiotic takes. That's why I say there is no Superman. There's many, many, many takes on that character, all of which would make the creators roll over in their graves, and have.
Okay, the lady up front here.
I wanted to say that I wrote children's stories for DC Comics, so I had to go back to those characters and write them for kids. And when you do that, you have to do what Bill was saying. You have to look for what was the core, what was the original part of that character, so that you can communicate that to children in a way that they can grasp the concept of what really is a superhero and why they do what they do. So, and I agree with you, in other words, is what I was just going to say.
And it makes the children's tales that they produce the only ones worth a damn, because they strip away so much of the crap.
Yeah.
Scrape away the barnacles, eventually you find the character underneath.
It was a lot of fun to do. It was challenging. I had to do Ra's al Ghul in 6 pages. Ask me how I did it. The only other thing I wanted to point out is the idea in the MCU where Captain America quits. We had several quitters in that portion of the story. You had Thor, who got fat and was playing video games, and you had also the Hulk, who gave over to David Banner and started being more peaceful. And so that whole, with them, you could tell it was not their time to quit, but it was Captain America's time. So, and that was something that I took away from that. But that was all I wanted to say. I could pass it on to whoever. Who else is next?
Yep, I think we had a gentleman in the back wall there.
No, he's got it.
I wanted your guys' take on the whine, the constant whine of Superman is so hard to write. You know, which is what Bill was saying. It's because they don't understand who he is, right? If you know who he is, it's not that hard. But this is in conflict with the other fact, which is that every superhero eventually becomes Superman. They all become bulletproof and invincible, and can do whatever they need as the plot requires. And I would just wonder what your take is on that kind of writer laziness, I guess I'd call it.
So I cheated when I started writing superheroes, which is I designed a superhero role-playing game before I wrote my first graphic novel. And so I actually had all the mechanics for exactly what the heroes could do, and I made a really strict rule to never cheat and let them just get powers as I needed for the storyline, which kept me honest. As soon as I started writing the graphic novels, I absolutely began to succumb to the temptation and wanted to add new powers exactly for all of the reasons that the writers do it, and it gave me new sympathy to it. And I actually imagine it would be really hard to write Superman today, simply not so much just because he's so powerful, but because no matter anything you do will also get scrutinized by exceptionally astute observers who can find every violation of the canon you've ever made, mistakes you've made. Why didn't he just do this? In issue 421, he was able to do this, so that could solve this problem.
That's exactly it. Every superhero becomes dumb because they can't remember all the stuff they figured out so many times.
Yeah, I mean, I've only done 150 pages of graphic novel, and I already have a Discord of people that are like giving me shit about it. So kudos to you for wading into that.
At least they're paying attention.
Yeah.
There's some good news, as was kind of touched on here, but not really explored, is the story isn't complete until it's in the reader's hands. And that's why I allow myself to cherry pick kind moments from otherwise damaged movies. I got to participate in a book of essays with some of these stellar Shakespeare scholars and the actors that have played. Anyway, they invited me for reasons beyond my understanding to contribute an essay. And you've heard the controversy, who really wrote the complete works of Shakespeare? Has anyone, Francis Bacon is number one. But, and I answered that question in my essay, which is I did. I wrote the complete works of Shakespeare because all of his stories don't become complete stories until you achieve the collaboration of the writer, the performer, and the receiver, the audience. When you write a novel and say there was a city up on the hill, you don't then go on for 300 pages to describe every street in the city and every person. No, that's the reader's job. He'll fill in that information, and when you fill in the information from the stories we get, that's when the story is complete. And so we have as many Supermen to continue that dead horse as there are readers to receive it, and that's why whoever your superhero character is that is beloved to you is largely because you helped create him.
So on that note, unfortunately, our time is just about out. No, don't worry about it, man. These are great. You guys did good. Oh, we got one more question? Okay,
Sorry,
go ahead, and then we'll wrap
So
it.
it's not Beowulf. Although it is.
I don't mind.
It can always be Beowulf.
It's always Beowulf. It's always Christ. Right. So you've been talking about it as an American story. In our Draco Alchemicus, our main character is actually Christ, but the problem is it's like he's God. So you've incarnated him into your story, and what kinds of actions and powers can he have? And I'm wondering about that. One, in the level of the American story, the degree to which these are saviors versus the degree to which they're. I mean, Beowulf gets killed fighting the dragon at the end. Talk about the superhero that doesn't get to stop. So it seems to me that the character arc of our longing is in tension between these two truths, and I wonder if anybody has come.
Beowulf doesn't get killed fighting the dragon. They only thinks he did. I wrote the sequel. The sequel is now available at Amazon, and
That's fine, but I wanted to hear
I didn't
about
have it in
Christ.
time for this convention, but it is for sale. Beowulf, the complete stories so far. And I don't cheat. There's a very good reason the dragon couldn't kill him.
So
I-
you do this
I'm-
in between writing Shakespeare, is what you're saying.
I'm very prolific.
I'm really glad you asked that question because I actually wanted to answer the last question with because people are afraid of death. People are afraid to let their heroes die, which I think is also really unfortunate. I think that's also very American, though, that we want our heroes to live forever for whatever reason. We want them to never lose. But that's oftentimes we equate death with loss, with losing, which is unfortunate. And so I'm glad you brought up Christ because a lot of these heroes do mimic Christ in many ways, and Christ's victory was his death, like and resurrection later, which comes back to Bill's point here. But I think that death can be beautiful, and I think that what a person dies for shows really what they care most about, like what they're really willing to put it, literally everything on the line for, right? And I think it's unfortunate that we don't let our superheroes ever die, with the rare case of like Iron Man in that movie. Like that was a great ending for Iron Man. I hated just about everything about that movie, I'll admit, but that ending, that was a perfect ending for him. Yeah, and
The reason superheroes can't die, at least the ones that are owned by the big corporations, is they are valuable corporate properties. And it is actually, they could get the pantsuit off them for throwing away valuable resources without getting a proper return for them. When they did the death of Robin, and finally the stockholders noticed, because it was a big thing. And it was, a nice sacrificial, this is a stupid character, let's kill him off and make it a big deal. They gave DC Comics 30 days to get a new Robin created because their stockholder meeting was coming up, and they legally cannot dispose of IP in this case without, actually getting a reasonable return on it. The characters will never die as long as they're valuable company properties.
I've got one question, which maybe you'd be a bit more of an insider on this one. I've only guessed that it was something legal having to do with DC acquiring Charlton Comics, because Captain Marvel, Marvel's Captain Marvel, died and stayed dead about that time that DC acquired Charlton Comics. There was something there, but I can't figure out what.
Yeah, it was just.
Also the time that, their DC's Marvel became.
Yeah, it was a big legal fight over the trademark. DC let Captain Marvel, the name, slide. Marvel realized that the trademark was available, scooped it up, created Captain Marvel, and then, of course, they've had to keep some version of Captain Marvel in forever. Otherwise, DC could potentially get the original name back. That's why in my run on Shazam that never happened, they wouldn't let me ever refer to him as Captain Marvel. It's legal crap. And
All right, I gotta interrupt. We have lunch is out there, and we have What the Frack, which I'll be hosting immediately thereafter at 1 o'clock.